bird sanctuary in Mukurweni, Nyeri County. Wajir Nature Park is a bird conservancy and a nature reserve located in Mukurweni sub-county in Nyeri County. Yeah. It is set between Mount Kenya and the Abadeas. It is set between Mount Kenya and the Abadeas ranges and lies approximately 160 kilometers north of Nairobi. The camp, which covers nearly 10 hectares of unspoiled natural forest, was set aside for conservation by the late Reverend Wajir. Following his passing in 1986, ownership of the nature park was passed to his son, Mr. Jage Gakunju, who formed a private entity, Wajir Nature Park Limited, as a vehicle to drive the development of the park as a conservation center for sustainable tourism, livelihoods, and environmental education. Over the past few years, Wajir Nature Park has had a variety of partners to support its role in providing conservation and environmental protection education to thousands of students and visitors. These most notably include the African Fund for Endangered Wildlife and the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya, who have played a critical role in building the Wajir Nature Park Limited management capacity and the flagship on the Education for Sustainable Development programs for primary and secondary schools. BG has been working for over 5 years in development projects in water and clean energy technologies, including work in Kisumu, Naivasha, Narok, and Samburu counties. During his breakaway from formal employment, he is investing his time into beekeeping entrepreneurship project at the nature park and writing articles on his perspectives on nature, man, and society. Please welcome BG, our speaker.
Thanks for the introduction, Mugwa. To the president, the board of this Rotaract charter, Rotaract members, my family members, ladies and gentlemen, good evening.
Good evening.
Just to check that everyone can at least see the pictures on the screen from where you are, so just make sure that you're sitting. You're sitting in a place where you can at least see some of the pictures on the screen. Can you see from there? No. You guys can see. Zambel, you guys okay? Okay. Yeah, so for me this is a great honor because this is the first talk that I've given in a non-professional setting, barring workshops and all those other boring things that you have to do for your job. And it's about, I'm very fortunate because even in workshops I've been able to talk about issues that I'm passionate about to do with development concerns of communities around the country. But today I get to kind of play around with something that I've been thinking about and exploring through the work that we have been doing with our family at Wajir Nature Park. Basically, to give an overview of my talk, the title is Nature and the Self, the Personal and Societal Impact of Green Spaces. So what I'll be doing is be taking you on a journey looking at the importance of green spaces from the context of indigenous Australians and contrasting that with our own experiences in Kenya and what I believe is the impact that it's having on us personally and in our communities through the perspective of mental health. So thank you very much for the opportunity. The Yolngu people in the far north of Australia tell how Walu, the sun woman, lights a fire each morning bringing us dawn. She decorates herself with red ochre, some of which spills onto the clouds, coloring the sunrise. Then she carries her blazing torch across the sky from east to west, creating daylight. As she descends to the western horizon, spilling red ochre at sunset, she extinguishes her torch and starts the long journey underground back to the morning camp in the east. The moon, named Galindi in the Yolngu language, was a fat, lazy man corresponding to the full moon, with 2 wives and 2 sons, whom he expected to feed and look after him. He became angry with his sons for not sharing their food and killed them. When his wives found out, they attacked him with their axes, chopping bits off him, giving us the waning moon. While trying to escape by following the sun, he climbed a tall tree but was mortally wounded and died, the new moon. After remaining dead for 3 days, he rose again, growing fat and round, the waxing moon. Until after 2 weeks, his wives attacked him again. To this day, the cycle continues every month. The Yongu stories even explain why the moon is associated with tides. When the tides are high, the water pours into the moon as it rises, creating a full moon. As the water runs out of the moon, the tides fall. Then the tide rises once more, refilling the moon. So although the mechanics are a little different from our modern version, the story shows that traditional Yongu people fully understood the relationship of the moon and to the tides. This depth of knowledge is reflected in stories about eclipses. The Walpiri people say a solar eclipse happens when the sun woman is hidden by the moon man as he makes love to her. On the other hand, a lunar eclipse occurs when the moon man is pursued and overtaken by the sun woman. These two stories demonstrate that traditional Aboriginal people had already figured out that eclipses were caused by a conjunction between the sun and moon moving across different paths along the sky, occasionally intersecting. For millennia upon millennia, the story of the natural world was indistinguishable from the story of our species. Aboriginal cultures on the Australasian continent, which have been documented to have existed for over 50,000 years, are the most obvious of examples. The Dreamtime, which is their narrative about reality, was not just the stories told within the community to explain the origins of man and the creation of the universe. It is also the governing laws of existence for these communities. They dictated the survival of both the individual and the communities they resided in. How to navigate the stars, how to judge the onset of seasons, where to find water, how to maintain the carrying capacity of their surrounding environment, how to responsibly utilize fires for both hunting and land management. And how did we reward Aboriginals for their pioneering stewardship of the environment? Statistics estimate that as a result of colonization of Australia, between disease, war, starvation, and conscious policies of kidnapping and re-education of native children, the Australian region's indigenous population declined from well over 1 million in 1788 to just a few thousand by the early 20th century. There is a quote, a very dark quote, that states, "The wheels of justice turn slowly, but grind exceedingly fine." Australia's first and second generation of settlers enjoyed profitable agricultural business during the 20th century. Since 2005, Australia has consistently scored between a 7 and 8 for the satisfaction of the quality of life for its citizens as polled by them. But this is going to change dramatically in the coming years. Few countries are currently experiencing the brunt of our existential climate crisis like Australia. Waterways choked with dead fish, bats falling out of the sky, fruits roasting on trees under the sun. With such a heavy dependency on exports such as education and agricultural products, climate change will leave no one untouched on the continent. Imagine a world where you are unable to gain health insurance for you and your family due to the rising heat. The cost of drinking water skyrockets due to salinity in groundwater reserves due to rising sea levels. And the flooding from rainy seasons plus rising sea levels eliminates the habitability of all your coastal cities. Disconnected from their spiritual identity as individuals and communities, the colonization of Australia almost destroyed the soul of the indigenous Australians. Their suicide rate is double that of non-indigenous Australians, as per research done between 2001 and 2010. And indigenous Australians are statistically the most incarcerated population on Earth, judged by the percentage of their population. New analysis done in 2018 is shedding light on the situation for non-indigenous Australians as well, identifying the prevalence of personal or community drought-related stress. The financial pressures of farming during a climate disaster and the ever-growing rural to urban migration are increasingly isolating farmers, both personally and communally. If there is one question I wish you to leave with today, it is to ask yourself this: is our own reckoning in this country with our legacy of environmental justice yet to come, or is it already here? Let's look at the facts. Just as the indigenous Australians, we had complex land management and stewardship practices based on animism, the attribution of a living soul to plants, inanimate objects, and natural phenomena, and the belief in a supernatural power that organizes our material world. Migratory patterns, taboos, we implemented a host of systems to respect the carrying capacity of our environment and the physical and spiritual sustenance that it gave us. The case of the Akamba community is just the most detailed, free information I could find on the impact of colonialism on these systems. What I found most shocking is how we have demonized the charcoal harvesting practices in Ukambani, completely overlooking the historical facts of colonial policies of land appropriation and the monopolization of the agricultural industry by settlers that pushed the Akamba and other communities across Kenya to throw away centuries of sustainable environmental practices in the obvious favoring of survival through charcoal selling over destitution due to the continuation of failed maize crops. Even more frightening to me was how efficiently we have continued this legacy of environmental injustice post-independence. With the blessing of Dr. Victor Ikawa, the following maps are from his doctoral research on the impact of policies on the development and management of recreational spaces in Nairobi. One of my favorite excerpts from his groundbreaking research is the little-known fact that the Arboretum, which we celebrate today as one of Nairobi's premier green spaces, was actually conceived as a trial plot to gauge the viability of exotic flora in the Kenyan climate, which is why it has so many exotic trees today. Most importantly, he details the inequities that deny access to green space in Nairobi and the class distinctions that characterize and perpetuate this situation. To read the quote from the slide again just for effect, of the 2,853 hectares of recreational green space in Nairobi, 2,335 is taken up for forested areas and golf courses, leaving 90% of the population to find the bus fare and entrance fees to attempt to enjoy the rest. Let me tell you why our reckoning is here. We are currently in the midst of a mental health crisis in this country. According to WHO statistics, 1 in 4 people presenting at a health facility in Kenya are suffering from a mental illness related to anxiety, depression, substance abuse, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and chronic stress. The latest projections estimate that by 2025, Nairobi will have a population of 5.9 million people, up from 4.5 million as estimated in 2018. We are running out of space to breathe, to think, to connect, to live, to love. We are running out of time. And although a return to the old taboos and customs may save the green spaces and essence of living for rural communities, such as those in the Mukogodo forest, we need a radical approach to save our young populations in the growing metropolitan centers. As studies estimate that by 2030, 62% of the Kenyan population will be living in an urban environment. As the volunteer director of Wajir Nature Park, undertaking the research for this talk helped me crystallize our position as one of the last defenders of green space, even in Nyeri County. With a forest cover of 38%, which is touted as one of the highest in Kenya, I think only second to Isiolo. The Google map in this presentation clearly illustrates just how much of this credit we need to rightly give to the Abadeers. And what about the relationship to mental health? Failed coffee industry policies, combined with over 60% of the population aged between 15 and 64 within the county, are a recipe for disaster. And the statistics back it up. A 2010 Nakada survey targeting that same 15 to 64 age group showed that Central Kenyans are spending 10 times more on alcohol than they do on health. Within all this doom and gloom, the surrounding region of our nature park is revered for the age and health of our elderly. My eldest uncle is 96 years old, his wife 93. 4 of my other uncles are aged 90, 92, 88, and 86 years respectively. At an average age of 91 years, they are 24 years older than the life expectancy of the average Kenyan. With the latest figures from the World Bank putting our current life expectancy as a nation at 67 years old. As a family, we made our conclusions a long time ago on the relationship between green spaces, green living, and personal health. More detailed research is needed, but the verdict is clear. We have work to do. Not only to save ourselves, but to save our children and their children, and this planet that we have devastated. For our part, as a family, we have dedicated our lives to promoting equitable access to the green spaces that have enriched and defined our lives. At the Nature Park, we have been running an environmental education program targeting local schools in the Central Kenya region to visit our forest and learn about conservation. And we have planted and maintained a largely indigenous forest of over 100 different species of trees. It is terrible for our savings accounts, but the rewards are beyond imagining. And we continue to extend an invitation to health and wellness professionals, youth groups, nutritionists, green economy entrepreneurs, yoga instructors, pastors, photographers, poets, and artists to help us tell the story of the impact of green spaces and the need for environmental justice and equity to improve all our lives in the short time that we have on this planet. Thank you for your time.